I recently watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy for the very first time. I know, shameful that I turned 26 in just a few weeks and I hadn't seen these movies. Absolutely incredible movies, by the way. I don't think I can put any other movies or series above them. But after watching these movies, I had a bit of an urge to play a Lord of the Rings game. I had already finished Shadow of Mordor years ago, and I had left Shadow of War unfinished. But that just wasn't scratching the itch. Not really sure what it was, but there was something about it that just felt like a chore, so I quickly uninstalled it. Then I remembered a couple months back, I saw a random clip of a game called The Third Age, a turn based RPG that had a striking resemblance to Final Fantasy X. Now, Final Fantasy X is without a doubt my favorite game of all time. So, seeing another game actually take the systems present there for themselves is obviously going to garner my attention. Before I dive into this game, I just want to say that I did start this by playing the PS2 version. However, I quickly realized the PS2 version is locked to 25 frames a second, and game speed is seemingly attached to frame rate. Now, me personally, low frame rates give me a headache. So I very quickly researched the other versions and found that the GameCube version isn't locked to 25 FPS. The only downside is that textures are seemingly worse and have this weird wobbling effect. But it's fine. As far as I could tell, these games are completely identical. So what did I think of this game? Well, I think the early game is actually decently strong. Story-wise, it's always a little bit behind the events of the movies, and every now and then it catches up. It's kind of cool when it wants to be. Like when Gandalf battles the Balrog. We actually join him and battle alongside him. You can battle alongside Gimli, Aragorn, and Legolas in Helm's Deep, and it's little moments of fan service I enjoy. It's not too on the nose or pointing at it and going, "Look guys, look, it's them." But we don't play as the Fellowship in this game. The party is made up of characters that I can only describe as cheap knockoffs. And it's kind of clear to me that these characters were designed to be EA's version of the characters in the Fellowship. Hadhod, the dwarf whose name I have definitely butchered, has a friendship with the charismatic bowman, Elegost, who seems to be based on Aragorn more than Legolas. Berethor has a relationship with the elf, Idril, which is completely thrown away towards the end of the game, despite Idril coming onto Berethor multiple times. But just in general, these characters just aren't that appealing. They never go past surface level. They are, in my opinion, the perfect representation of a MacGuffin, which, if I'm being honest, doesn't really matter. The purpose this group serves is to just get us to the next location from the movie. After all, this is a tie-in game. But that's not to say there's no plot involving these characters. There is. It's just bad. It's so phoned in that a lot of the time I was convinced they had dropped the plot point from the very beginning, which was Berethor looking for Boromir. And here's the funny thing about this plot point. Even though their motivation for continuing is finding Boromir, I'm not entirely sure they ever find out that he's dead. It kind of comes across that either EA forgot about him dying, or they couldn't find an appropriate time to put it into the story. It's eventually revealed that Berethor had been stabbed by the Witch King and was turning into a wraith, but Idril, the elf, was using artifacts to stop him from turning. And I don't know, man, I just found it so hard to actually care about this story. I wouldn't say it's bad, it's just nothing. Before I move on to talking about the gameplay and the game's systems, I really need to show you guys two things. An absolutely hilarious out of nowhere cutscene that genuinely made me jump more than any horror game I've ever played, and the transition from cutscene to final boss, which I will talk about after the clip plays.
We meet again on the other side.
You are transformed.
She barely lives.
What is this?
A Morgul blade. I was too late.
I shall not fail.
Barathor.
I am here.
You have rekindled hope in me. Let us face the days ahead, together.
My liege, how may I repay you?
You bow to no one.
How may this be answered, my lord?
We gather our full strength and march on the Black Gate.
The darkness is deepening. Suffered a defeat, yes, but behind the walls of Mordor, my enemy is regrouping. There is no life in the void.
The lead up to the final boss and the final boss itself is quite possibly the worst stretch of a game I've ever played, and I wish I was exaggerating. The Minas Tirith section is pretty bad, but it's mostly fine because the visuals and look of everything does change quite a bit. But it's when you get to Pelennor Fields where this stretch of gameplay really falls apart. It is quite literally just one big hallway section with forced unavoidable battles every couple of steps. It sucked. It really did. And another thing that really bothered me about these two sections was that it felt like every single battle had an enemy that could cast an ability that reflects damage back to the attacker. And as far as I could tell, there was only one way to actually get rid of it, and that's because a party member has Dispel. And I'm pretty sure that's the only source of Dispel in the game. And that gets me onto this game's progression for each party member. As with any RPG, every character has a level, and the basic RPG stats: strength, dexterity, etc. But what I wasn't expecting was for the game to let us allocate skill points into a stat spread of our choosing. I really thought that this was just going to be like most other RPGs, where stats are predetermined upon leveling up. Something I didn't like about the progression system though was the way you get new skills and abilities to use in battle. Each character has a category of abilities based on their respective weapon. Barathor has swordcraft, Hadhod has axecraft, Elagos has bowcraft. They also usually have another category called spirit power, but some characters have different names for this, so I'm just going to call it magic for simplicity. Barathor, for example, has leadership, which is typically buffs to the party. Idril has magic that can heal or apply haste. These two are different categories of abilities, and the way you get more is by using abilities within that category. On paper, this seems fine, until you realise there are 6 total characters. Each category requires hundreds of uses to get every ability, and no matter the ability you use, it gives 1 XP to that category. So instead of using every character as needed, you just end up picking 3 characters you like and sticking with them. It didn't feel great, honestly. And you might be thinking, well, surely there's a way to grind in this game. And yeah, there are, which is a good lead into my issues with the quote-unquote random battle system. To put it simply, there are no random battles. There are 2 states of battle, both indicated by an orb in the top left of the screen. An Eye of Sauron, which when it's fully highlighted, will trigger a battle. But here's the issue. These battles, while technically random, can only be triggered in very specific parts of the game. And the eye filling up is time-based, not movement-based, like in other turn-based RPGs. So instead of running around in a circle, you kind of just have to stand in the area with Sauron's eye until the battle starts. It's tedious and monotonous, and half the time you can quite literally just keep walking through the area and the eye won't even fill up. The other orb is a blue orb full of what looks like lightning. This indicates a one-time story battle, so you can't really grind these either. Each character has a passive tree too. I kind of like this system a lot more as it's directly attached to character level. 1 level equals 1 XP. Get a new passive skill every 5 levels. And this may be a placebo, but I really felt like in the grand scheme of things, stats just didn't matter. For example, dexterity increases the chance for an attack to land. Barathor has a leadership buff called Company Valor, which increases dexterity, so even more chance to hit. And the amount of times I would miss 3, 4, or even 5 attacks in a row, it would make even the basic of battles drag and feel like they go on forever. But I also think battles are a little bit unbalanced anyway. We can only have 3 characters in battle at a time, and enemies can get up to, I think I saw 5 or 6 in one battle, and it just feels tedious fighting these battles when the enemy just has so many more actions than you. Multiple times throughout this game you get a guest party member, Gandalf against the Balrog, Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli during Helm's Deep. Having 4 party members really makes this game's combat flow so much better. And they've shown that 4 party members was possible, so it felt really weird that it wasn't baseline. The Lord of the Rings The Third Age is not a good game, but I think it's far from the worst game I've ever played. Developers had some really good ideas and concepts here that I wish were never abandoned. Once the Lord of the Rings license expired, EA could have used this system on a new IP or existing IP, and with some tweaks could have been a massive hit, because let's be honest, the industry for a very long time missed out on really great turn-based RPGs. The game has some glaring issues, but overall I had fun with it. It's really a shame that games like this are going to be lost to time due to license expirations or publishers just not caring to preserve the things they create. I do think this is worth a play, but only if you have nothing else to play.